There's no doubt who won last night's Republican presidential debate, and it wasn't Mitt Romney or Rick Perry. It was Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan made a deal.
President Reagan, when he made his decision back in 1987, he saw this as a human issue.
Ronald Reagan.
Are we going to stand in the Reagan tradition?
Under Ronald Reagan, we'd have 3,700,000 more Americans working.
I strongly supported Ronald Reagan.
Under President Reagan, we'd have 12 million more jobs out there.
In Reagan, they trust. Reagan got name-checked 48 times during last night's debate. But you know, the funny thing is that if the actual Ronald Reagan had been on that stage defending his actual record, he would almost certainly have lost. In fact, he would have been destroyed. The real Ronald Reagan was a conservative. There's no doubt about that. But he was also a pragmatist. After cutting taxes dramatically in 1981, only to see deficits rise similarly dramatically in 1982, Reagan began raising taxes. 1 year after his big tax cut, he signed a tax increase that wiped out a third of that tax cut. The next year, he added a gasoline tax for infrastructure investment. And then, the year after that, another $50 billion tax hike. All in all, between 82 and 84, he raised taxes 4 times to help tamp down on deficits. Now, compare that to what we heard on the stage last night, which we'll get to in a moment. But remember, too, there was the Tax Reform Act for Reagan of 1986, which raised corporate taxes. When William Niskanen, Reagan's chief economic advisor, heard about the plan, he said, quote, Walter Mondale would have been proud. And there was the Social Security reforms, which raised taxes on the Social Security benefits of high-income retirees in order to make the system more solvent. But last night, that type of compromise was not on the table.
At the previous debate, everyone on stage raised their hand to say they would, I want to get this exactly right, not have accepted a debt deal that included $10 in spending cuts for every $1 in tax increases.
I join my fellow participants here. What we should have been looking at is a way to get the spending under control and capping it, cutting it, and getting a balanced budget amendment.
Oh, and under Reagan, the federal government's payrolls rose by 61,000. For comparison, under Clinton, they fell by 370,000. So imagine Reagan defending that record before that onslaught last night. It would have been very, very tough. But I want to be very, very clear. My point is not to suggest Reagan was some closet liberal. He wasn't. He signed a huge tax cut. He clearly governed in a deeply conservative fashion. My point is simply to say Reagan was the type of conservative willing to make an accommodation with reality. He was willing to compromise with the circumstances that he found himself in. And that is not something I heard a lot of on the stage last night.